Hey guys, I just wanted to throw out a quick disclaimer, basically, about something before the video starts here. You can skip if you want, but I think it's quite important. We didn't know this before beginning this section of the lore series, which is going to be dealing with Cantha, the first expansion to the first game, but it's come out that ArenaNet currently have no plans whatsoever to add Cantha into Guild Wars 2. Which is something I think we were always expecting to happen, and the reasoning for it sounds really bureaucratic. It just sounds like nonsense that's coming mainly from NCSoft, the publisher of the game. However, it was mentioned by a dev that if this was something the fans really wanted to see, it could still be a realistic possibility for the game. We just need to kind of make it clear to the devs and NCSoft that there is demand for an expansion, that it would sell, right? And when this came out, there was a big response from the community. You might have heard of it before, but that big response never resulted in anything. It completely died away, and it doesn't look like it went anywhere. We didn't get like a statement or anything. And I and the artists who have made this video you're about to watch, we've basically spent the past couple of months completely immersed in like the Canthan lore, their culture, their architecture, their history, everything about them, and there's loads there. I can tell you honestly, because I'm kind of in this mode at the moment myself, it would be a crime to not see that come back for the second game. All this said, this is just, I guess, my way of showing ArenaNet, hopefully, that Guild Wars 2 really needs Cantha. And if you feel the same way after watching, please just make yourself known. Hopefully, this just doesn't fizzle out and never become anything. Hopefully, we can have another good attempt at least getting like a statement from them. So just spread the information if you can. There's a link in the description, should you come away from this feeling the same way, to a thread on the forums you can use to discuss it or let ArenaNet know. Or, you know, not to further my own agenda too much, but, you know, just sharing this video so that people can see and people know and people get excited, hopefully, would probably be quite helpful to the cause. Hopefully the numbers will speak for themselves. But yeah, so that's just kind of something I wanted to say. I thought it was important that people knew about this. If people didn't know at all, then there you go. Take it however you want, but without further ado, here's the next part of the lore series. We worked really hard on it. I hope you enjoy. It was hot. Far too hot for men and dwarves alike, and now another member of their party had been killed by the Massat. Devonna and her companions were stood deep inside the Fire Island chain, having breached their enemies' outermost defences. Yet it cost their dwarf companion his life. Breknar Ironhammer, brother to King Jarlis of the Deldrimor Dwarves, would fight no longer. Menlo stood by Vizier Kilbron's side, as together they cremated the dwarves' remains and held silent in respect. Ahead waited the impenetrable defences of the Onyx Gate, and still a trek to the summit of the largest volcano on Tyria. Volcanic ash fell about and stung their necks, while thick, black clouds hung overhead, blanketing the sky. It was dark. At this very moment, a new tale was beginning. Far south of the Fire Island chain, 100 miles and then 100 more beyond the clashing seas, was a celebration. Here, rather than ash, fireworks filled the sky. Clean and clear, the rockets danced among the stars. Music played loudly and a great feast was underway. It was the day of the Tengu. Canthans had come in huge numbers to Shing Jea Monastery to honour one man and the end of a war. Long the people of this remote southern continent had fought with the Tengu over land. Aggressive expansion of the human empire encroached on many native Tengu territories, and when one tribe of the Birdmen responded by massacring a village of humans, war became a very real possibility. Human propaganda then spoke of Tengu eating those they had slain, while man-born disease spread to Tengu hatchlings, forcing the avian race to kill their own young and brethren. Hatred brewed between the two races, and, unsurprisingly, war was declared. But 1 year ago, to the day, that war had ended. Not all Tengu accepted the treaty now in place, but for the first time in many years, Angju Tengu and mankind lived in peace. It was thanks to Master Togo, the headmaster of Shing Jea Monastery, and to many, the greatest living hero in Cantha. A lively night of drinking, eating and dancing commenced, and by sunrise, the people were spent. The emperor returned to his palace on the mainland, and the guests took their leave. Soon Shing Jea Monastery stood as it always did, Cantha's premier training academy for young heroes, and tomorrow, 6 new students would join it. The headmaster met them at the gate. Amongst the older students stood Gw2, a confident ritualist who shared his profession with Togo. The man took a shine to him immediately. Also there was Taya, a young woman studying to be a monk, and Lucas. Bold and confident, Lucas was a Kurzic warrior, seeking to make a name for himself and to secure his legacy. There were 3 younger students too, an assassin and an elementalist, but also a character of unsure profession or background who would, by either chance or destiny, find themselves tied to the fates of Cantha. At Shing Jea, each profession was taught by 1 headmaster and 2 instructors. This meant that Taya, the new monk, would be training under Headmaster Amara and her 2 assistants, while Lucas, the warrior, would study beneath 3 different mentors. As Lucas would find, the staff did not always get along. For example, the headmaster had recently hired a Tengu warrior, Talon Silverwing. This proved an unpopular decision with other instructors at the monastery who were still largely racist and bitter from the war. The assassin instructors too preached different uses for their profession, and at times the rangers seemed oblivious to one another's activities. Yet always these instructors showed 2 sides to the same coin, and in time the students made progress. Students at Shing Jea were required to be of Canthan descent. Foreigners had not been accepted to study for a long time, the last being a young monk named Menlo who had returned to his northern homeland some years ago. Cantha in general had not interacted with the other provinces of men much recently, but this had begun to change. Trade with Krita had resumed, and travellers from the north were once again visiting the exotic southern lands. The Canthan mainland was dominated by an ever-growing city, Kaineng. Stretching across much of the northern coastline and western flanks of the continent, there was both much wealth and poverty within its bounds. Deeper inland, the city gave way to regions of simultaneous devastation and beauty. The Echo Forest and the Jade Sea, 2 vast areas of the world petrified in a catastrophe caused by the death of 1 man 200 years ago. The inland seas there had turned to solid jade, the forests made stone. Life stripped from these echoing places and their denizens corrupt, they were beautiful but dangerous to unwary travellers. Yet mankind did live there, the Kurzics of the Echo Forest, and the Luxons of the Jade Sea, vassal states, a part of the empire, but with distinctly alien cultures and origins. Shing Jea was rather distant from all of this. A considerable sized island off the mainland, it hosted rice farms and green hills filled with water buffalo and vegetation. It was largely rural, but the monastery served as a major landmark to the west of the island, with Saitang Harbour, a bustling port town, falling to the east. There were mountains on Shing Jea too, where Canthans had erected quaint and peaceful temples or shrines for meditation. That said, here there were dangerous creatures that threatened those to venture too far through the snowy passes. Aside from these and the local Crimson Skull, a cult of pirates who harassed rural areas, life was simple for the Canthans of Shing Jea Island. Yizhou was first, having been personally trained by the headmaster, but soon the new students had all earned their insignia, a mark of great progress. It was tradition for such promising students to be presented for a formal meeting to the local Minister of Cultural Affairs, a position currently held by Minister Cho. He lived in an expansive estate where the students would visit him. In the morning they set out, yet, when they arrived, something was wrong. Minister Cho possessed a great menagerie of exotic animals. Under normal circumstances, they roamed the estate in comfort, a marvel considered one of the finest in the world. But they had grown sick, not a sickness of just the body, but the mind. Enraged and no longer themselves, these animals rampaged through the estate, spilling blood. But it did not stop there. The staff too had grown sick. They did not appear much different from their regular selves, but inside they had changed. Minds clouded, friends and partners attacked one another in senseless anger until their bodies littered the estate. The guard at the gate told what he knew, that it had suddenly come over his friends inside like a gas in the air. Those who had kept their wits described seeing a shadowy form appear and then disappear, but no more than that. The guard's son was trapped inside, and Master Togo vowed to find him. There was no reasoning with any who were infected, and it was a sad affair to cut them down. Through the grounds they tracked the guard's son, harassed by all manner of exotic beasts from across the Great Sea, until at last, in the quarters of Minister Cho himself, they found the young boy. But he was not alone. Minister Cho stood in the room also, and he was sickened. Worse than the others, Minister Cho had changed in appearance too. Flesh yellowed and pulsating, he was barely recognisable as ever having been human at all. He was dangerous. Togo's hand forced by the threat on the guard's son's life, he and the student slew what little remained of the minister. May the envoys carry you swiftly on to the gates of everlasting paradise, spoke Togo in traditional Canthan send-off. Rest easy in the mists, my old friend. He turned to the young boy. The child described having a dream, in which the wind blew all the leaves from the trees and made the people and animals angry. He was crying. Master Togo appeared deeply troubled. The plague could spread, and he planned to fight it. With the boy returned to his father, Togo and Yijo took their leave. Lucas and the remaining students were tasked with warning the Gw2 Tengu of the plague. Many Gw2 lived in the village of Eri nearby. It was a place of high-perched lodgings nestled on the slopes of the mountains. Despite the peace treaty, visiting a Tengu settlement was not something humans preferred to do, as it was hard to feel welcome. That said, the Gw2 Tengu now reserved much of their hatred for the Yetis of the mountains, their sworn enemies since before Cantha was even a unified nation. Only the Sensali Tengu, cousins of the Gw2 who did not accept peace, were a threat to the students. But they did not live in the Eri, seeing the Gw2 as traitors to their kind, and for this, the Sensali would receive no warning of the plague. A friendly-faced Talon Silverwing met the students when they arrived. As well as being a noble friend of Togo's and a hero in the Tengu Wars, Talon Silverwing was Lucas's warrior instructor at the monastery. The citizens of Eri had already experienced the plague. A beast like Minister Cho had been stalking their settlement, striking at lone Gw2. Talon Silverwing had tracked the creature to a southern beach, but needed help to kill it, a matter the students hastily assisted with. This done, with the Gw2 sufficiently warned, Lucas and company returned to the monastery to find it largely emptied of students and instructors. Togo was waiting at the top of a long stairway on the far side of the monastery grounds. Alone. The headmaster explained that, though he was loath to place lives in danger, he had sent many members of the faculty away to hunt the plague. Yijo had gone too. They were travelling to the east of the island, where Togo suspected the plague had originated. He asked now for Lucas and the other promising students to join them. Yijo had gone alone to the holy valley of Zen Daijun on the far eastern shore, while other packs of instructors had been sent to key locations. Closest were Instructor Zoe's group in the mountains north of Saitang Harbour. That would be Lucas and his friends' first stop. If they did not assist Togo, he warned, no place on the island would be safe. The journey to Saitang was shorter than it otherwise could have been, for Master Togo showed the students a road less travelled, and soon they found themselves being jostled in the streets of the largest settlement on the island. Being a port town, there was always much traffic at Saitang Harbour, owing to the boats to and from mainland Cantha, as well as far-flung Tyria to the north. Stopping only briefly, the students then moved north themselves to the mountain tops, where Instructor Zoe was stationed. She was a gruff-looking ranger. At some point she had lost her left eye, and she bore many scars, marks of some struggle in her past as yet unresolved. Beside her were 3 more instructors, including Talon Silverwing, who had journeyed from the area also. They met not as students and instructors now, but as equals threatened by a mysterious affliction. Mountain snow crunched underfoot as they followed Master Togo's instructions, though he was not present himself to assist them. Their goal was a sanctuary deep in the mountains, but by the time they reached it, the monks who lived in its halls had grown ill with rage. The place was swarming with sickened men who had inexplicably been targeted in this distant place. The students and instructors were forced to fight. Together they slew their sad quarries with what knowledge the monks may have had, now dying with them. How was the plague spreading? Someone or something must have brought the sickness there, but how and why? Togo's first mission had failed, but he was prepared for such setbacks. Further east was the Linkai township. If any place on the island were threatened by conventional plague, it was this slum. Togo had already sent a group of his colleagues to defend it, and the students were now asked to lend their assistance. Upon arrival, they saw that indeed the township had fallen to the affliction. All Lucas and his friends could do was put down those contaminated. Yet, the second here seemed more numerous, perhaps a sign the plague source was close by. Togo believed that at the source waited a means to resolve the crisis, but still they had not found it. Now only Zen Daijun and Yizhou remained. Perhaps he had found the answers. Zen Daijun was on Shing Jea Island's easternmost shore. A high valley, it offered stunning levels of verticality that, even under the threat of the plague, remained beautiful. The region was considered sacred by the people of Shing Jea, owing to the presence of a guardian spirit, Zunra. Zunra was a kirin, a horse-like, rare and intelligent creature native only to Cantha. Zunra had watched over the people of the valley for hundreds of years, keeping them safe. It was unlikely the plague had struck them there. Master Togo, though, had come to believe that Zen Daijun was the very source of the plague. Upon arrival, the students saw this was for good reason. The valley was overrun. The afflicted here were not just maddened people either, but transformed entirely into monstrosities like Minister Cho or the beast that had stalked the area. Zen Daijun was swarming, and Yizhou's last known whereabouts was deep inside. The different teams of students and instructors gathered at a pass into the valley, forming the largest group they had yet mustered. Traditionally, the people of Zen Daijun would flock to a temple in the center of the valley during times of trouble. Given the nature of a plague, this would be disastrous. Perhaps then, Togo thought, they could find Yizhou helping people there. Travel through the valley was tough. Crowds of afflicted barred the way and could only be passed with immense difficulty. The air itself was malignant, and only with the direct aid of the guardian spirit could they pass. But Zunra grew weak, and by the time Togo, Lucas, Talon, Zoe, and everyone else reached the temple, their Kirin protector was spent. Of all the horrors seen thus far, none compared to the Zen Daijun temple. People had gathered in huge numbers, infected one another, and devastated the area. Their breath was thick and heavy with sickness, and only a few of the abominations stood before the students were recognizable as their former selves. Yizhou was recognizable. Grotesque, afflicted, filled with fury and hate, there he stood amongst the crowd, a shadow of his former self, his potential unfulfilled. Master Togo had sent the young ritualist to his death. He pressed into the temple, allies at his side, and the afflicted there were slain. Yizhou was the last to fall. All was still. At first it seemed there were no answers, and Yizhou had died for nothing. But then Togo noticed it. A glowing red hand, shining from the floor, magically burned into the mahogany. A fire that wouldn't go out. It filled Togo with dread. He had hoped he would never see it again in his lifetime. "This is the harbinger of the deceiver, the mark of the wicked," he spoke. "The guild symbol of Shiro Tagachi, the man whose death turned the sea to jade and the forest to stone." Menlo blinked and reread the letter. "Return to us, Brother Menlo," the last line read. "We need you." It had been sent by his old headmaster. A warm sun was shining through the window, and seagulls could be heard flying in the distance beyond the ancient lighthouse of Lion's Arch. Kryta was at some semblance of peace. This is what he, Sin, Devonna, Aidan and Eve had fought so hard for just a few months ago. Could Menlo really go now? Risk his life again and so soon? What of his companions? Why would they join him to fight for a nation they knew nothing of? "We need you." Yes, Menlo would lend his aid to Togo, and his friends wouldn't let him go alone. Soon the company were, once more, geared up for an adventure. But it would take them time to reach their destination. A great distance separated Gw2 and Cantha, and a trip across the unending ocean would be no small feat. When they arrived, Menlo intended to meet Togo in Kaineng city. The headmaster had failed to stop the plague on Shing Jea Island, and anticipated catastrophe should it reach the mainland. So he had travelled there himself. With Menlo's help, the headmaster aimed to warn the emperor and prepare the city for disaster before it struck. Menlo only hoped he did not arrive too late. After a lengthy voyage, at last land was in sight. Sprawling Kaineng city, 100 miles across and beyond, was built against the shore. Unidentifiable structures, perhaps resembling lodgings, were stacked atop one another high into the sky, a mess of wood and stone hastily pieced together. Kaineng was full. The city had run out of space, and now it built to the stars. It seemed as though it would soon burst at the seams, the mess of construction falling to the sea, where it would be swallowed. A great walled city, filled with riches and filled with loss. As the boat drew closer, Menlo identified a series of low wooden piers jutting out from the otherwise sheer wall that defined the edge of Kaineng. These were the docks. Before landing, the boat passed by an offshore rock formation shaped as a dragon. A curious thing, it stood in stark contrast to the city itself, and Menlo wondered its meaning while the vessel came to its eventual halt. The group was met by Jamai. Like Menlo, Jamai had attended Shing Jea Monastery years ago, and there the two had become fast friends. She explained that the hour was late. The plague had beaten Togo to the city, and it had spread through it like wildfire. In the poorer areas, afflicted roamed the streets unchallenged, and many were infected, sick, and dying. She led the party to the front steps of the imperial palace. Red and gold, it stood amongst the slums about its walls. Common men were not permitted to enter, and so the place was largely unspoiled by the poverty that surrounded it. Master Togo had already come and gone, unclear whether his warning to the emperor had been helpful. At least this area was safe. Imperial guards defended the palace and whatever else they could, but their numbers were thin and the city vast. The deeper into Kaineng one ventured, the more destitute it became. Menlo and friends could only follow behind Togo, days late. Last they heard, he had made for Visana Square, a quarantined zone in the bowels of the metropolis that had been struck hard by infection. The Imperial Guards had sealed it off. Those stuck inside were doomed to fend for themselves, never to escape and further spread the plague. The headmaster was inside. It was a simple matter to reach Visana Square, but after passing the guarded quarantine checkpoint, things became dangerous. Through the winding alleyways and disorienting cityscape they travelled until, at last, they heard the sound of a struggle. Peering from an elevated pathway, Menlo spied Togo with a group of men and women surrounded by the infected. They were in a courtyard, and like sewage the afflicted rose from holes in the ground about them, primed to kill. Menlo raced to Togo's aid, and just in time, for suddenly a new wave of afflicted burst forth that only the combined might of the two parties could push back. There was scarcely time for introductions, but Menlo and Togo shared a brief moment to reunite. There was much for Togo to explain, and little that Menlo understood. But explanations would come later, as Togo was distracted by a new discovery. They had come to an old bookstore Menlo recognised from his time at the monastery. It once held magical and religious texts from across the world, but now was in a state of disrepair. But the damage did not seem caused by the afflicted, instead as though someone had passed through searching for something. Who had been here? A short ways beyond the bookstore was a long stairway down. Togo was keen to descend its steps, convinced it was hiding the very thing he needed to confirm his suspicions. Cautiously, the party climbed down. Light faded about them, and the air again became heavy and warm. And there it was, something different, something dangerous. A demonic construct walked upright amongst a hive of afflicted. It was unlike anything they had seen before, and then, out of the blue, Togo spoke to it. "Shiro Tagachi," he called. "Adieu yourself, foul spirit." There was silence. Was this truly Shiro Tagachi? For the demon before them looked like no man, much less one who had died 200 years ago. There was a moment of confusion before it spoke back. "I am no mere spirit, mortal. Like a god, I have breathed life into this body. Come, feel the bite of my sword." And with that, it attacked. The creature possessed unbelievable quickness and ability with a blade. It and the afflicted flanking it crashed on the heroes with a force that caught them off guard. Slowly, though, the mass of both Tyrian and Canthan allies at Togo's side fought back, and eventually the battle against this new evil was won. The construct fell to a heap on the ground, and the heroes stopped momentarily to recover. But then, in that same second, something else happened. From thin air, before their very eyes, suddenly manifested a man. Dressed in a long red and gold coat, wielding twin swords, he looked at them. Only for a moment. In the next, he attacked. Lightning quick, he sliced through the heroes, every one of them, and before a single person could react, he had severed them. Flesh was torn from bone, and in an instant, Shiro Tagachi took their lives. Menlo, Togo, Lucas, Devonna, Zoe, Talon Silverwing, and all else died on the spot. Their bodies fell to the floor and were still. All was black. Togo was drifting. But there was strength in him still. He could feel it. The Headmaster opened his eyes, and there he saw, smiling down at him, was an envoy.